good morning. Welcome to Rise and Thrive with Dr. J. Nicole, where we're talking all things faith, purpose, and wellness, and we are rising in faith and thriving in purpose. Today, I have a very special guest. I am honored to be able to call him my minister and my earthly spiritual leader. I'm also very honored and gifted, if you will, to be able to call him my godfather. He is the minister at the Prince George's Church of Christ in Landover, Maryland, as well as a licensed psychologist, right? So he does a brilliant and amazing job of blending together mental health and the Word of God. And so I wanted to thank him for joining us in this space today so that he can bless us all with some of this wisdom and biblical knowledge. So welcome. Excuse me, I'm so excited in all of this. I forgot to even say your name. This is Minister Dr. Bruce McClure. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. J. Nicole. This is an honor for me to be invited to your podcast. So thank you for the invitation.
Yes, and thank you for accepting. I know you're busy. And so I reference you in different episodes, so it's only right that the listeners and viewers have an opportunity to be able to hear straight from you. And thank you for all that you provide and the way that you are able to like really make the Bible applicable to like real life and give scriptures for navigating our life. So today's episode, y'all, we're going to be talking about boundaries and how boundaries are biblical and how to protect your peace. So many people struggle with setting boundaries because they fear disappointing others, they fear saying no, being misunderstood, or even seeming unkind to others. So boundaries aren't just about saying no. They're about creating a space for what God has truly called to you and called you to do, right? And in fact, boundaries are biblical, and you're going to hear more about that today. And even Jesus set boundaries, y'all, in his relationships with his time as well as his energy. So in this episode, we're going to explore how to set healthy boundaries without guilt, how to recognize when your peace is being compromised due to a lack of boundaries or like weak boundaries, and also how to stand firm, how to stand 10 toes down and protecting our God given peace. So, Brother McClure, why are boundaries not selfish? And why are they necessary for living a God honoring life?
That is probably one of the most foundational questions biblically that should be asked. Boundaries date back as far as God creates the heavens and the earth. He creates all of the fish and fowl, the plants and animal life, and then he creates man. But for everything he created before man,
Mhm.
there were boundaries. For instance, fish do not dwell in the earth, they dwell in water.
Mm,
Plants, for the most part, that humans consume don't come from water, they come from the earth.
mm,
Those are natural boundaries of the universe. So when he creates man in his own image,
mhm.
the same creator says to us, male and female, in order for you to thrive and to be successful, you've got to have boundaries as well. So boundaries are just as important to this world as any other component of the world. Without boundaries, everything is in utter chaos. That's the foundational reason for boundaries.
That's good. I never even thought about that. And see, this is what I love how you break down the Bible. You take what's right there, what's obvious, and then you're able to pull out like what's implied and find like the deeper meaning and
Yeah,
connections to make it
yeah.
applicable. That was so good. Okay. So let's talk about a little bit about Jesus and how he modeled boundaries.
Oh my goodness. I was looking at some passages
Mhm.
that you had shared,
Yeah.
and one of the things that Jesus consistently did, unapologetically,
Hmm.
is lived within boundaries and yet he never apologized for doing so.
Okay.
We apologize. Well, I'm sorry I can't do this because. I'm sorry I can't go here because. But to the contrary, I was looking at one of the passages that you shared, Matthew 5:37.
Mhm.
Jesus made it very simple. Let your yes be yes and your no be no.
That's the one. That's
Just real simple.
mhm.
But there's some caveats built into that. Unless the individual know what his or her yeses are and what his or her no's are, then they can't operate within their own boundaries. Jesus knew his yeses and he also knew his no's. And therefore, he could say to you or he could say to me, I can bless you with this, but I can't bless you with that. I
Yeah.
can go here with you, but I can't go here. Yes is yes, no is no. But in order for that to be effective, each individual must know within himself or herself, what are my personal boundaries?
Mhm.
Uh, Dr. J, your boundaries may not be my boundaries.
Correct.
My boundaries may not be your boundaries, but each individual must know his or her boundaries. And I think that's really what Jesus is teaching in the Matthew 5:37 text. You shared another passage in Proverbs 4, verse 23.
Mhm.
This passage focuses on the individual's heart. We must know our own heart and we must guard our heart with diligence. That word diligence is almost a military term
Okay.
where
Tell me
a
more.
person is put on a watch. It's they are on guard duty.
Okay.
And because I am on guard duty with my heart, which also contains, guess what? My boundaries.
Mhm.
So, what this proverb writer is really saying is each individual must guard with all diligence his boundaries, her
Yeah.
boundaries.
Yeah.
It's not your responsibility, nor is it my responsibility to guard your boundaries or you mine.
Mhm.
But if I don't know what my boundaries are, how can I guard
Yeah.
them? Very simplistic things that are said in this. You shared another passage, 2 Corinthians 6:14. Here's a caution not to be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. Now, we could go on a tangent about what that word unbelieve means,
Yeah.
but for the sake of setting boundaries, I think we could safely say it means I must be cautious. You must be cautious. The audience must be cautious
Mhm.
about being interwoven with people who do not share my boundaries.
Mhm.
That's unequally yoked. My boundaries are my boundaries, and if they're too far out of balance, then why should I be in a close knit, walking hand in hand
Mhm.
with that individual? So we can talk about, pagan religions and sacrificing to idol gods. And I know theologically that's what he's talking about.
Uh-huh.
But we're talking practical applications. Not many in this audience are going to be idol god worshipers.
Right.
Uh, but we are struggling with safe boundaries with people
Mhm.
where their boundaries do not coincide with ours. So I think a safe application of 2 Corinthians 6:14 for me is to be careful about being unequally yoked with people who do not either subscribe to my boundaries
Mhm.
or more so respect my boundaries.
Yeah.
I don't have to subscribe to everything Dr. J believes,
Correct.
but I should have a respect for your boundaries.
Mhm.
I don't know if that makes sense or not.
You know it does. You know it does make sense. So now that you've broken that down biblically, like, yeah, I want to tap into the mental health piece, the psychological piece. What would you say about boundaries and how to do that to set them and guard your peace?
Oh my goodness. Uh, Several months ago, I was talking about the brain, and there's a little place in the hidden away in our brain.
Mm,
Uh, the Greek word is insula, but it means an island. Everything that comes into our psyche, whether it's visual, audible,
mm-hmm,
through smell, or through hearing, touch, it's stored away into our insula,
mm-hmm,
and it will never be erased.
mm-hmm,
So here's the exciting thing about it. We draw from it every day, but that insula is developed. Everything that's stored in it came from somewhere. Now, when we talk about processing through the right brain, the left brain, the good side, the bad side,
mm-hmm,
we've got to now draw from the island. And now, what am I going to allow to come out? What if there are no boundaries, no filter? And that's a term that we hear people use quite frequently. They have no filter.
mm-hmm,
Well, what that means is, guess what? They have no boundary. The filter is all of us have a filter.
mm-hmm.
The question is, has it been developed?
Yeah.
It could be shut down. If there's too much pain and too much negative things, then that becomes our definition of okay boundaries. That's mostly what we have to draw from.
Yeah.
It's out of balance,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense.
There's so much that's in there that I'm hearing, right? Because when you're saying like no filter, then I thought impulsivity, right? Like they're not even trying to manage any of the impulses. They're just going off of emotion, thoughts, just whatever comes up. And there's very little like self-regulation that's happening sometimes. And you are absolutely correct when you say it's a reflection of their environment and likely growing up in an environment where there were poor or no boundaries.
We talk a lot about ADHD.
Mhm.
A lot of children who grow up into adults with other behavioral problems, but we start out with children typically labeling them as ADHD.
Okay.
Well, if that's not an organic disorder, then it's induced from the environment, from their
Yeah.
exposure. So if a child is persistently exposed to high anxiety, high stress, loud, debatable, fussing, fighting, honestly, and I hate to say, even in killing environments, gunshot environments, hunger environments, their system has become acclimated to be braced for the worst,
The chaos.
the chaos. So what happens with that is the boundary filter says, I know there's a better way, but I don't know. Paul put it this way: there's a piece of us that's always wanting to do good, but evil is always present.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's something in that that goes back to Genesis 1 and 2.
Okay.
When God made Adam and Eve, everything was good and very good.
Yes.
They had the God boundaries put in them. Here's the good news. Each one of us, when we're birthed into this world, have the propensity to adhere to good boundaries,
Okay.
but they have to be developed.
Yes.
But the seed is there.
Okay.
but it has to be nurtured and it has to be watered and it has to be watched and honestly encouraged.
So
And then it,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead.
Mm-mm. You were still going. I heard an and.
Nah, we're good.
You sure?
Yeah,
Okay. I was just gonna say what I heard in there, or like my interpretation of what you're saying is that we all have the propensity for God boundaries because we are made in his image, right?
correct.
And that
Correct.
our environment, and I love that you use the seed analogy, right? Like that, what we're fertilized with has a direct connection to what our outputs look like and how we interact and engage in the world.
Absolutely.
Okay. See, and y'all, like the world, we think things are so complex, and there's a simplicity within the complexity that anyone can understand these things and make changes and to be able to, improve their lives and to change. And I like how you also gave us another way to look at ADHD and the environmental factors that can contribute to it.
Yeah. The system has been turned on to hyper alert,
Mhm.
hyper vigilance, always scanning,
Mhm.
looking for danger.
Mhm.
And once that is turned on with an intensity, it's hard to turn off.
And you
Uh, well, we talk a little bit, and I made some notes about trust.
yes, go ahead.
At some juncture, if there's too much hypervigilance to where we know there's safe boundaries, but those boundaries haven't proved to be safe.
Yeah.
For instance, listening to adults. Well, I listen to adults,
Mhm.
but look at where it got.
Adults tell children the wrong things to do all the
Uh-huh.
time.
I went to school, but at school I got bullied.
Mm.
I was laughed at. And I tried to operate within those boundaries, but because of how they were handled within those boundaries,
Mhm.
now we can't function within because in the formative boundaries, home, community,
Mhm.
they weren't safe. So now we move into another world of school, where I'm communicating to you from. There's a daycare center. Over 75 children are in this daycare center. Many of the children, and I run into them every day, they can operate within the boundaries of the teachers, right? But
Mhm.
there may be two or three children on site every day who struggle with boundaries.
Okay.
They can't go to the water fountain by themselves. They can't go to the bathroom. Now, it's not that they can't drink water or they don't know how to use the toilet, but on their way to the bathroom and in the bathroom, they may take a whole spool of paper and unroll it, try to flush it down the toilet.
Yeah.
Uh, Water fountain, instead of them just drinking the water, they'll just sit there and hold the button and just watch the water flow because something has happened where boundaries are to be crossed.
Mm.
But the majority of the people in this world operate within boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think that's good news.
Yeah, yeah, that's so good. And what you're even talking about with safety, you can't tell the person you're safe, right? They have to experience it in order for it
Right.
to say like go into the island that's back in there, right? So that they have that experience to know and to be able to know in this space, I can dial that hypervigilance down.
Yeah.
I don't have to be constantly scanning and on guard. And for some people, you're absolutely right. There are very few places where they experience it because as a child, you don't have control over your environment.
Yeah. Uh, with wartime situations, we coined the term PTSD,
Mhm.
but PTSD is more expansive than just wartime.
Yeah.
A lot of children, believe it or not, who suffers from what we call ADHD.
Yeah. That trauma. Mhm. Oh, that
So boundaries become self-defined. I redefine boundaries in order to protect me. And if that means hurting you or harming you, my boundaries are for survival.
Yeah.
Those are not healthy boundaries, but nonetheless, to the person who's acting out, they are their survival tool.
Ooh, and that can get real interesting
Yeah.
because if your boundaries are constantly changing based on safety, oh, that just connects to so many things and what you will do. And it's almost like you don't have your personal code. Like what wow, how far what
Personal code is more dependent on the moment.
yes.
Uh, the tra- Sometimes we label these people as being transactional people.
Uh-huh.
Whatever it takes in this moment for me to land on my feet,
Mhm.
that is my boundary. And what frustrates a person who's trying to operate within generally accepted boundaries is you say, but well, yesterday we agreed on this. Well, that was the transaction of yesterday.
Yeah.
And you're expecting that to become the norm boundary.
Mhm.
But for a person who's transactional and just trying to survive, they're saying, no, that worked for me yesterday. But today we're dealing with an entirely different set of scenarios.
Yeah, but then that also brings up also and that also brings up like what are their values then? Because it sounds like their values
Survival
fluctuate with their ooh, that was good. I was gonna say the values fluctuate with the boundaries, which means the overall value is survival at all costs.
at all,
Whoa. Whoa.
survival. Yeah. When I was working with the treatment foster care group,
Mhm.
helped me honestly, and I work. That's been my goodness, 25, 30 years of interaction with treatment foster care.
Mhm.
But it really helped me understand children in a way that I never understood. In fact, in order to be put into a treatment foster care program, you had to have been sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally abused, and many times some of all of the above had happened
Yeah.
at the same. And what we found out is the acting out behavior, the destructive behavior, the over compliance was simply a way of how do I get through this moment.
Yeah.
They're not looking 24 hours down the road, but to the adults who are facing them right now,
Mhm.
how do I get through this and still end up breathing?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, we could this just where we are, this could be a whole other episode in itself. But this is really, really fascinating. And I wanna like move us forward a little bit too, so that our listeners can get more. Like I got access to you on Sundays and Wednesdays, right? Like so I want to make sure I maximize this time so they can get as
Good,
much as they
good,
can from the time that we have
good.
with you today. So can we talk about a little bit about like people pleasing, fear of disappointing others, and like you talked a little bit about like the scripture that your yes be yes and your no be no's, but like how can we talk about like thinking about people pleasing scripture, but also how we can use those to prevent like burnout, resentment, like breakdown in relationships and connections.
Yeah. Uh, there's a passage in the 15th chapter of the book of Matthew, verses 11 through 14.
Hmm.
And it's a story about Jesus.
Okay.
And Jesus is teaching about setting boundaries and guarding your own heart, as we talked about earlier, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But then he warned his disciples that, well, it's not what goes into the body, it's what comes out. You know, we think that means only food.
Right.
Remember, the receptors into the psyche are the eyes,
Senses.
the senses. So, yeah, in the Matthew 15, verses 11 through 14 text, Jesus actually talks about the boundaries, but he uses the physical senses to illustrate it. It's not that which
Okay.
goes into the body that defiles a man, but that which comes out of the man. And he's not talking about just the ingestion of food, but he's using that as an object story to help people see the bigger picture. Uh,
Mhm.
Everything that goes into our psyche comes through scanning through our visual, our sense of smell, our touch, our hearing. So he's saying everything in the universe comes
Mm.
into our body. There's not a day go by, Dr. J, whether it's you or me or anybody else, to where we see
Mhm.
everything that's within our purview. The
Yeah.
illustration I always use with that is when my children were little, every year we would take them to
Mhm.
the beach before school started and Ocean
Mhm.
City or Virginia Beach or somewhere. And we would
Yeah.
always go to the beach. And now I preach, right? I love the Lord and the Lord loves me. I love my wife loves
Mhm.
me. My children are with me. And out there on those beaches, there are women in bikinis that almost look like a handkerchief, a see-through handkerchief at that. And here I am, the gospel preacher with my beautiful wife and my children. And we get in the car headed back to PG County. And I say to my wife, the only person I saw at that beach was you. Am I telling the truth or am I lying? That's
Well,
an
we know you
absolute
saw
lie.
other things, so we're thinking. Yep.
That's my point. We scan. We can't help but scan. We can pretend we
Mhm.
didn't see what we saw. We can pretend we didn't
Yep.
hear what we heard. The scents that we smell, we can say, oh, I didn't smell that. Oh, did you hear what she
Right.
said? I didn't hear a thing. Well, this is what Jesus is saying. It's not what you
Mhm.
scan, it's how we process it and how we allow it to come back out. We've got to set
Mm.
boundaries around what we scan, but we
Yeah.
scan everything. And to pretend that we don't, we're going to get trapped in crossing our own boundaries because then we're going to wonder, where did I get it from? You heard it, you saw it, you smelled it, and we tried to pretend we didn't. And then when we're put in a challenging situation, guess what? That challenging situation is more familiar than we know. It's
Wow.
phenomenal.
Wow. Yeah, it really is. It really
So
is.
Jesus said, well, set the boundaries. Now, here's what happened in that Matthew 15 story, even in that illustration.
Mhm.
Jesus tells the people that are listening about watching the boundaries, right?
Mhm.
And they turn around, his disciples say, Lord, don't you know you just offended them? Telling them a story like that, don't you know you offended them? Jesus says, well,
Mm.
leave them alone because they're blind leading the blind. Well, he's not saying they're physically blind, but again, an object lesson. If people who don't know boundaries, respect boundaries, live in boundaries, are leading people who don't know boundaries nor respect boundaries, You can lead those people anywhere. And typically it's in a ditch,
Yeah.
a place of no good. That's why he says, leave
Off
them
a cliff.
alone.
Mm.
People who
Yeah.
don't have boundaries, who don't respect boundaries, hey, if you start following them, they're going to lead everybody into a bad space in their head.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That's just
good.
one
That's
of
good.
Jesus's teachings to us. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about, man, it's so good. It's so good. Can you talk a little bit about how boundaries are helpful with like managing burnout or reducing resentment or even just like exhaustion?
Yeah. Great question. Great question. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus again in verse 7 said, ask and it will be given.
Mm,
Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open to you. How do we avoid burnout? We've got to ask the Lord to show us our limits.
yeah.
Every person has limitation. And I've got to ask the Lord to show me my limitations. And I've got to be willing to live within that and be okay with it.
Yeah.
Because if
Yeah.
not, I'm going to be pursuing the imaginary finish line of being all things to all people. And that's not possible.
And it's not possible.
No, no, it's going to lead to burnout. When we
Mm-hmm.
have low self-esteem and we're trying to build that up inappropriately, it's going to lead to burnout. When we've been
Mm,
taught or we're embracing uh, an unhealthy definition of success, it's going to lead to burnout.
yeah.
So there are a lot of components to how to avoid it. When is enough enough? Just
Yeah.
because, let's say, Dr. J, you are a high energy person. Have you ever been around people who have more intensity than you? And you
Yes.
try to move your energy to where their energy is, you're going to burn out.
Yeah. Matching energy is definitely can lead to exhaustion.
Yeah. And it's no different in real life. Uh, so a
Mm-hmm.
person has to understand their own energy space, meaning professionally, economically,
Mm,
relationally. Uh, and if we don't, we're going to burn out.
yeah.
As a gospel
That's
preacher,
good.
I've got colleagues that I admire. I mean, these
Mm-hmm.
guys are prolific. They are
Yeah.
orators. They're theologically astute, and they can. The term in preaching is they can hoop and never miss a beat.
Yeah, that y'all
That's
said
not me.
that.
That's just not
Mm,
me. Now, I will burn myself out trying to keep up with those guys.
mhm,
I've got colleagues in ministry that last week, 2 weeks ago, the lectureship you guys attended in Chicago,
mhm.
there were some men
Yeah.
there. Those men, some of
Yeah,
those
it's a
men
handful.
left the Chicago women's lectureship and they went directly to Atlanta to the lectureship.
Mhm.
And then they probably,
Mm,
some of them had booked gospel meetings for this week,
that's a
next
lot.
week, and the following week. It works for some of these guys. It doesn't work for me.
Mhm.
It would burn me out. So even in ministry, we have to guard our heart against the burnout
Mhm.
because we're trying to keep up with other people. We're
Mhm.
trying to live in the homes that other people have, drive the cars that other people have, do the
Mm.
vacations that other people do. And we'll do it, but it will burn us out.
Yeah. At what cost?
At what cost? So that's why the James or the Matthew 7, well, James 5, James 1, verse 5 also. But we have to ask the Lord, regulate me,
Yeah.
regulate me.
That's good. What does James 5 say?
James 1, verse 5, if any lack wisdom. Now, we think that's just talking about wisdom, but
Mhm.
even discernment, wisdom in setting boundaries. If we
Mhm.
don't know how to do that, let him ask of God. This is the
Yeah.
brother of Jesus. And this is the rest of that James 1 5 text. And he said, if we ask of God, whatever it is that we need, he'll give it to us. The King James used the word liberally. In other words,
Mhm.
he's not going to give you just a taste of it. He's going to pour it into who we are liberally, abundantly, with the measure that we need. If I need more discernment in setting boundaries so that I don't burn out, ask God
Mhm.
and he'll direct my path in that. He'll show
Yes.
me, look, Doc, there are things over here that would be great, but you're going to kill your crazy self. Is it worth that?
Right.
So just be happy and content with your lot in life.
Mhm.
Now, Dr. J, your lot in life is not my lot in life,
Yep.
but burnout can occur in me when I'm chasing you.
And vice versa.
Uh-huh. I can celebrate you. I can be on your team, help you, uh, give you encouragement, but that doesn't mean I've got to take up the mantle and replicate it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that James 1 and 5 because like that is just really a good reminder.
It is. It is.
It really is. And that like we don't know what we don't know. And some people, they stay there with it, right? And they don't seek anything. They just leave. They have this deficiency. They have this gap, and they just accept the gap instead of going to God, like you said. So thank you for sharing that. And that can apply to so many every area of life where you have a gap.
Every,
Ask God.
every.
Ask God. That's so good. Thank you. So let's shift and talk a little bit about how to recognize when your peace is being compromised. So, like, what are some of those signs that a person might need stronger boundaries?
Wow. That's a good question.
I know, and and that in itself could be an episode, but
We do what we call after actions, where you go back after an event has taken place
hmm
and we analyze it, assess it. Uh,
okay,
One of the ways that has helped me in determining have I overstepped my skis? And I do this every Sunday, believe it or not. After I
hmm
preach, I go back and listen.
okay.
I'll play it back.
Now you playing it back one time, right? We not because some people they might hear this and think that rumination is okay, right? Where they're playing it back on loop, can't sleep, mind full. We're not talking about that.
No, 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 no. I'm playing it back because I want to see in that where did I hit a high note
hmm
and where did I miss?
Yeah, it reminds me of athletes watching film. or tape, however you wanna go back. Mhm.
Exactly. Here's why I think that's important in not dealing with burnout excessively and being okay biblically, like we do the Lord's Supper, 1 Corinthians 11. One of the verses that we keep saying in that, but let a man examine himself.
Yeah.
But we've got to go and replay the tape. That's true with me with sermons, but it can be true also as I replay an event.
Mhm.
Uh, so let me go back and assess number one, why did I participate in the event? Was I prepared for the event?
That's a big one.
Uh, what was my projected outcome? What was I hoping for? Accolades? What was I hoping for? Another appointment somewhere? Uh, and then I've got to be honest about it. Deep down inside of me, what was the real soul comforting benefit?
Yeah.
Now, you say, well, what do you mean? Did it please everybody else? And at
Mm.
the end of the journey, was I miserable? Well, I know then I've overstepped my boundaries. It wasn't for me. There was nothing
Mhm.
gratifying. Now, I'm not talking about being self serving, but a lot of people who go beyond their boundaries hate what they've done.
Yeah, but then they take it out on other people,
Uh huh.
and
They're miserable.
it's been their own choice, and I think that's a good segue. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, but what has happened is it's the external appearance. They are man, they loved it. They had a great time
Yeah,
at my expense, my bound.
yeah, and that can reinforce the lack of boundaries
Exact.
because of the outcome, and if they're not clear with what you said, I like those kinda, like, 3 questions. Why did you do it? What did you expect to get? And, what was the middle one?
I don't.
I'll go back, but it was good. Those are really good to run it through. That was good. So, how can we what advice would you give on how to say no with grace and confidence?
It almost goes back to that Matthew 15 text,
Mhm.
and it begs another question. What does it mean with grace and
Okay.
the confidence is I know why I said no. The confidence is I know why I said yes. Now, whether that's with grace or not, that becomes kind of subjective.
Yeah, that is situational.
Yeah. And that's why Jesus said, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Now,
Mhm.
uh, is that filled with grace, seasoned with salt? I don't know. Sometimes you just have to say it
Yeah.
uh, and throw grace to the wind because the grace is compounded in the action. Uh, a person is drowning, literally drowning.
Mhm.
How gracious can you be pulling that person out of their condition? It depends on what's happening. Uh, in lifeguard training, they even tell you there may be a time where you have to knock the person out.
Yeah, because they can drown you and themselves.
Exactly. Now, that doesn't
Huh?
sound very gracious, but there's grace built into that because your objective is to rescue the person at any cost. And that's why I say the term grace can be very subjective.
That's good. That's good. Okay, okay. So, what do you do? And I think this makes me think of Titus 3:10. And I love listen, I've been Titus 3:10 and all around with people. And since you really brought that scripture to life, right? Like handling pushback when people don't respect your boundary. How would you recommend people deal with that?
Sometimes it's innocently done, naively done, but sometimes it's a communication of, do they really respect me? And that can be a hard one to accept.
Mhm.
If that person has a respect for me and these are my boundaries,
Mhm.
then why are we constantly having this knockdown drag out about my boundaries? Do you not respect me? You don't have to
Mhm.
agree with it, but can you respect it? You don't have to like it.
Mhm.
But because of the relationship the two of us had, can you accept? And if you can't, then personally, I began to say, is this a one sided or skewed relationship?
Mm, that's good.
Am I
And I
willing to
think
hold
that
on at any
yeah,
cost?
yeah. And I think that happens a lot where people they make your boundaries about them. But I also
Exactly.
think that that's a reflection of a person who doesn't have their own boundaries or strong ones because they don't know how to respect it. And something else that I've learned is if you are a person with boundaries, communicating to a person with low or no boundaries, they get upset with you for having boundaries because you're doing something they would not do and they don't even recognize it's not healthy.
Oh, and that's more common than we
Yes.
absolutely is.
Yes.
Yes.
Once I started to recognize that and see that show up in people, well, I would never. It's because you don't have boundaries. You struggle to say no to people, and you live with a lot of people pleasing as your motivator for doing things,
Yeah. There's an
and
Old
we
Testament
sacrifice
story.
ourselves.
Yeah. There's an Old Testament story as you were saying that that came to mind in the book of Esther. Uh,
Okay.
Esther is a Jewish girl living in the Persian kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, before Ahasuerus Xerxes become her husband, he has another wife.
You're right.
And what he did was through a big party. You could drink, you could eat, you could just party to your heart's delight.
Mm-hmm.
But here's one of the things the Persian king did not mandate. He says, everything is here for you. The finest wines in the world, the most delectable foods in the world, the most beautiful women in the world. You can just party, party, party according to your own boundaries.
Mm.
That's an amazing story. Nobody
Mm.
was compelled to do any of it.
Yeah.
And the king had made up his mind. And if you choose to, great. But if you don't, you won't hurt my feelings. I won't feel offended. And I threw the
Yeah.
ball.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Dr. J, here's the crazy thing. He defied his own rules with his own wife because he invited her to come into the room where all of the men were
To show her
to
off.
show her off.
Yeah.
And she says, that goes beyond the purview of my boundaries. He got rid of her.
Sure did.
On one hand, he says to all of the party goers, I'm not going to compel you guys to do anything beyond what you want to do. It's all here. All of the
I
wine.
guess they were the party goers, not his wife.
And I guess my point is we have to learn to respect the boundaries of even the people that are closest to.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
Now that is
yeah,
one boundary violation we like because then that's how Esther became queen. But
yeah.
but it's a good
Because
sword for that. We
he,
definitely do.
yeah, he didn't respect the woman that was closest to him.
Mm, 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 mm. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap us up here to respect your time. So, I guess what is one of the biggest lessons that you have learned about setting boundaries?
I read your script, so I was prepared for the question.
Okay, good. That's what I provided.
Actually, I will answer that the way I close every sermon.
3
3
points, and the lesson is yours.
Yes. Number 1, I must know my own purpose in order to set boundaries around the purpose. I can't set boundaries if I don't know where I'm headed. Secondly, I must get into the purpose that I want the boundaries around. See, knowing a purpose and moving into it are not the same.
Right.
There's an old saying about the graveyard
Mhm.
is the wealthiest place in the world.
Mhm.
It's filled with rich ideas from good thinking people that
Mhm.
never moved into their purpose.
Yep. Yep.
You must know your purpose. I must know mine. I must get into that which I know.
Mhm.
And then I must abundantly expect an abundant harvest.
Exceedingly and abundantly,
I,
yes.
if I don't expect that, then what I'm saying is I expect to fail or I expect to be just mediocre. Uh, in Mark 11, verse 24,
Mhm.
we are told by the Lord to pray with the expectation of having that prayer fulfilled.
Yeah.
If I'm going to move and into a place of truth and thriving in it, then I've
Mhm.
got to first know where do I want to go?
Mhm.
What am I going to do when I get into that? And do I just say, here I am? Or do I expect a win?
Yeah.
We're in basketball playoff season, okay?
Mhm.
These young men aspired maybe all their lives to go to the
Mhm.
NBA. Then they were drafted, they got into it, but then they just sat there, lollygagging, not coming to practice, getting out on the
Mhm.
court, just waving at the crowd. Well, what are their expectations? Abundant wins or just a win now and then?
And there's some that's it. They just wanna get in. And then you have the people who are like, "I wanna win an NBA championship." So that looks completely different.
And whatever price I have to pay within the boundaries,
Mm.
back to your theme, rise and
Mhm. Mhm.
not just get up, but
Yeah.
move with a purpose, with a
Yeah.
goal in mind. And are we willing to make the sacrifice to get the results that we intend?
Yeah.
We have to give up something. Yeah. Uh, and then that becomes my new boundaries in the world of work, in the world of
Mhm.
relationships, in the world of spirituality. Rising and thriving and moving into a new realm, we have to move into a new boundary setting as well.
Yeah.
And
That's
success is
good.
yours.
So boundaries evolve is also what I'm hearing. And sometimes boundaries can hold people back. I'm hearing on the other side of that, if they don't allow their boundaries to evolve with their new environments
You
as
got
they move through different stages and seasons of life.
That's an excellent, excellent way to look at it. The boundaries that
Mhm.
I had for myself 25 years ago when we planted this church,
Mhm.
the foundational boundaries are still in place.
Mhm.
But Now, some of those boundaries that are more flexible and fluid are the very life source that keeps the church in motion. 25 years ago, it would have been unheard of for the Prince George's Church of Christ to have multiple song leaders.
Yeah.
That would have been unheard of.
Mm.
It was not within the boundaries, but we've
Yeah.
grown in our thinking. We've grown in allowing the Lord to expand his use of us. And with the
Mhm.
younger population that we have,
Mhm.
we've got to move where the Lord moves us. And the boundaries, we still sing a cappella.
Yep.
See,
Yep.
that's the real boundary. I'm not
Yes.
going to go outside of that boundary.
Right.
But whether we sing with 3 or 4 or 5 people singing the parts, that's discretionary.
Yep.
That's how
Yep.
we
That's good. It's good and a real life example. Okay. Well, are there any last remarks before I take you into our signature question?
thought that was the signature.
Well, the signature question is if you could leave our audience with one powerful truth to help them rise and purpose and thrive, excuse me, rise in faith and thrive in purpose, what would it be?
Be genuine, be true to yourself, and operate within the boundaries that God has given to you. Be genuine, be yourself, and operate within the boundaries that God has given you. And that's what makes for a great environment. When you have a mixture of uniqueness, it just takes you to a whole different space. If everybody was a genie, a Dr. J, or if everybody was a Dr. Bruce,
Mm-hmm.
what happens? It takes away the authenticity of the entire group. But when we have everybody that is locking into their own genuine self
Mm-hmm.
and operating to its full potential, and I'm being authentic about that, I'm moving with purpose in it.
Mm-hmm.
That's my advice. That's in ministry, since we're talking about that, I don't try to replicate other preachers in the area.
Yeah.
That takes away from my uniqueness. I'm unique.
Uniquely and wonderfully made.
I can celebrate everybody else's, but I'm unique. Uh, th-
Mm-hmm.
this church is different from the other churches, but yet we're still all the same church. That would be my hopeful takeaway to the audience.
Yeah.
Never shelve your uniqueness.
Mm. Love
Be
that.
your
Thank you.
own
Thank you.
authentic self.
Yeah. That's so good. Your boundaries are your boundaries and they are God given.
And
Yeah.
as long as we're
That's so
operating
good.
in that, it has to be a good result.
Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much again, Dr. McClure, for coming and joining us today on Rise and Thrive with Dr. J. Nicole, and talking with us about boundaries. So, we always wrap up the show with a call to action for our audience. So, we're asking you to reflect where in your life do you need stronger boundaries? And then next, we want you to take action. Set one boundary this week that prioritizes your peace and well being. And finally, the episode wouldn't be complete if I did not send you out with an affirmation. Boundaries are not barriers, they are protection for my peace, purpose, and well being. So thank you all again for tuning in to another episode of Rise and Thrive with Dr. J. Nicole. The merch is available. You can go to www.evolvewithdrjnicole.com and go to the podcast link and you'll see an option to shop the merch. Make sure you do that. Episodes are dropping every Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And let's give one last love deposit to Dr. McClure for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And this officially concludes this episode of Rise and Thrive with Dr. J. Nicole, where we are rising in faith and thriving in purpose. I'll see you next week.